Well, we have Brian Cohen from Andover Properties on. Thanks for coming on, Brian.
Yeah,
thanks for making the trek.
You know, we were just talking about the Whoop versus the Apple Watch.
Were we talking about that versus the
I
Apple?
didn't realize that Alex was whooping now.
Whooping.
So,
Whooping
I don't
big
know.
time.
Look, I mean, I wear an Apple Watch, but I don't wear it to bed. So I do know that when I have 3 drinks, I don't sleep. So
So you don't really need it, I guess, to tell you that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's worth the hype.
I'm really using it so I could show Grace that every time she argues with me, my heart rate spikes up, my stress goes through the roof.
Well, I also have 8 sleep, and that's the mattress cover.
Everybody
that-
says 8 sleep that's
I haven't heard of
that's the
this.
tool that you absolutely need.
And it cools or heats to your body temperature, like the way you like to sleep. But it tells me every day I've only slept 4 hours, and your sleep score is 50%. I'm like, oh well, I must have to change something.
So does it connects to your mattress?
It's
a cover.
It is a cover for
wow.
your mattress,
And it's like it's basically like a, I don't know, ventilator, whatever the right term is. It's like HVAC cover for your mattress.
water cooled. So it like
Oh, is it water cooled?
Yeah. So so you have water and it goes through like basically like how you have radiant floor heat.
It's getting out of control. This is like, how many things do we need at this point?
You need to sleep well.
Yeah.
It's apparently
I
the
love
best
it.
tool like for optimizing your health and recovery.
I get really
It's-
hot when I sleep, so that sounds like a good thing.
You ever tried sleeping outside?
I unfortunately don't get a commission for selling these.
Yeah.
Well, if we get the new sponsorship now by A-Sleep, Brian, you're getting a care package.
Totally.
Well, thanks for coming on, man. It's good to have you here.
Yeah, I mean, so Andover is interesting because you're pretty diversified in some alternative asset classes, we'll call it. I know you're in self-storage, car washes, some industrial. You're also doing third-party management. So there's a lot to unpack here, as Alex likes to say.
I'll say it non-offensively. Like, you guys touch the stuff that's not super sexy, that not a lot of people ran for in real estate. And,
But now they are. And it's starting to happen.
Right. So it is interesting. And so in 2002, I left Tishman Speyer, which I focused, was only doing office and residential.
How long were you there for?
I was there for about 3 years.
Okay.
So started my career there. I did realize my name was not a Tishman or a Speyer, so it was going to be very hard to ever grow.
Did you ever try changing it? Just doing an add-on?
Show up one day with as a
Maybe
Tishman?
they treat you different.
It has, by the way, that's worked in a lot of big real estate families where you marry into it.
Yeah.
So
That's funny.
I did try that. That didn't with who I was dating and it's different times in my life. It didn't stick.
All right. That's funny.
So I wanted to start, go out and, start my own thing. And what I actually originally set out to do was convert industrial buildings into multifamily.
Why was that the plan? Is that like the adaptive reuse play? Or are you talking about Domino Sugar Factory kind of?
Exactly.
Okay.
Domino Sugar Factory is a perfect example of that. So that's exactly what I set out to go do and actually was able to raise capital to go do it. At the time, there was a firm called RCG Longview where I actually raised the capital for a particular deal. The particular deal happened to be a self-storage facility in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. This was the beginning of 2003, and it needed a zoning change. I thought it was a perfect conversion into multi. And I still love multi, even though I never wound up getting into multi. So I wound up, while I needed that zoning change, I wound up going to a self-storage conference. And in 2003, didn't even know there were self-storage conferences.
So how did you even find that? I mean, were you just exploring different asset types at that point and saw a self-storage conference advertisement and said, let me go take a look? Or
I can't remember if Google worked back then, but
okay, so this is just kind of random. You go to this conference.
Maybe it was Netscape.
Yeah,
it was. I did some research, realized they have a national conference, and it was still very early days. I mean, back then it was the top 100 companies owned 20% of the industry. Mm-hmm. Now the top 100 companies own 50% of the industry. So it's changed dramatically. There's been a tremendous amount of consolidation from the bigger operators. So I went out there and realized as I was meeting a lot of the operators, there was some institutional backing, but very little. There were a couple of public companies at that time, but only two. And there was just marketing was the yellow pages. So there was no online marketing. There was no revenue management. There was no sense of like, oh, do we charge more for our upper floors versus our ground floors? Mm-hmm. So it just seemed the lack of sophistication from people that have been in it since because there are a lot of old timers that were in it in the 1970s and 80s. Mm-hmm. And but still not a big industry. But they just kind of put up their four walls and their doors and rented units and didn't get creative with fees.
Yeah, just some monument sign out on the road and yellow pages, like you said. Yeah.
Right. So I came back and one of the things like I realized is, from that is, look, it's the lowest percentage of NOI, CapEx is the lowest percentage of NOI of any form of real estate. So literally your tenants move out, there are no toilets to replace. Right. There's nothing, there's literally maybe you got to do a little sweeping. So it's very, it's just not capital intensive. And back then you needed 3 people per facility to operate it now. Fast forward to today, we have 1 person operating a facility. So just the expense margin was just, is just very enticing for that business.
Now, when you got into that, what was a going in typical cap rate?
Oh, it was 10 back then.
Wow.
10 to 11 was what was where
it's so crazy to
we were building to 12s.
Wow. Okay. So you get started. How do you find your first deal?
So first, it was all development. So we did basically adaptive reuse back then. So we started off converting old industrial. Like the first facility we converted was an old industrial property in Newark, New Jersey. It was a burnt out building on Route 21, and we added a whole floor to it. We redid the whole building, but it's like a totally like dilapidated building, hasn't been touched in about 20 years. So that was the first, and then we did another conversion. We did an office building conversion, then a big box retail conversion before big box retail conversions were a thing, bowling alley conversion, and that we did with all high net worth capital. So then that was basically from 03 to call it late mid of 06. Then we were just finding nothing. And at that time, we actually had conversations with Warburg Pincus at the time and Angelo Gordon. And they wanted to do something bigger. And I was like, okay. And we started bidding on assets and developments, and must have bid on 100 in late 06. Started bidding about 100, over 100 properties. And from late 06 through 07, then 08, then GFC hit, was not winning anything. We tied up, one deal, basically after kind of like when Bear was, going down. We did tie up one deal because there was some softening, but then Lehman went down, and then it was like it got worse. And we were like, all right, we killed that deal.
But just so everyone knows, how many self-storage sites do you currently own and or manage?
So currently today we own 170 storage facilities.
Okay, so you definitely got there. Everyone should know you definitely scaled.
We've also sold 100 in the past.
Yep.
So it's I'd be at 270 if I didn't sell anything.
Sure.
Yeah, it also blows my mind that you went from, you had left Tishman. And how long were you there before you left?
There's 3 years.
So you did your 3 years. You set out to do multi-conversions and then adaptive reuse. And then you're like going scratch development for storage facilities.
Total 180. I mean,
on something that you didn't really have a ton of experience or maybe any experience.
Zero experience.
Effectively, right?
It was just I went to a conference and realized, you're swimming in what I thought was, a less sophisticated pool.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like multifamily office. You have so many tremendous, big institutions. It's also how we got into our other alternative asset
Yeah.
classes.
You said something when you were talking about storage, which stuck in my head, and that was the percentage of NOI that you're spending on CapEx, which I think is a theme in your larger portfolio. But I want you to explain all that after. So you start developing properties from 03 to 06. How many did you guys do before you started chasing the big dogs?
We only got so during that time period, because as we're learning how to operate, we only got to 5. So it was slow. It was slow. It's also slow raising money to someone who's like, all right, self-storage, new. So 5 properties that we got underway. And that's when, we started talking to some institutional capital providers. And we started, with those institutional capital providers, we really angled towards Angelo Gordon at the time. And we, as I said, we tied up a deal. Lehman collapsed. I tried to retrade that, which was a nice sizable deal, and wish we still bought it, but you couldn't get financing at the time. After Lehman collapse, everything was kind of like shut down.
Sure.
But the one thing we were able to prove during that time is self-storage during GFC only had a 7% decline in NOI for the publics. We kept on growing NOI on all of our stores. Some of them stable, some of them not stable, but even the stable ones, wound up still growing during that time period.
Now, was that a common theme across the asset type during the GFC? I mean, people probably were storing more than they were before, I imagine. So
during GFC, there were only 2 quarters of negative NOI for the
broader market.
For the broader market, for the storage REITs. So whereas like your next layer was multifamily, which was negative 15%, and then everything else was precipitously worse.
Well, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
At the time, your cores were office, multi, hospitality, retail, right? Hospitality bites the bullet because you're not staying at hotels. Office, people are giving up their leases. Multifamily, people are moving out. Retail, people are shopping less. If you have stuff, you still have to put the stuff somewhere.
Well, look, you're also what you saw is those businesses that are folding, they are thinking that they're going to get back into business at some point. Yeah. So the easy thing is to put yourself,
that's very interesting.
Take all your stuff, put it in a $100 a month storage unit as opposed to paying
whatever
$3,000 a month for whatever lease they're in. Yeah. So during, look, storage is not recession proof, it's recession resistant. So that's been one of the, just one of the great things about self-storage in general. But the one thing is so going back a little bit, how we got into alternatives is our first several developments we built. We didn't mean to start that diversification that early, but we built self-storage because everything I studied was you just don't need, and still to this day, you don't need infinite amounts of self-storage. So we always like the idea, or I like the idea of doing a little bit of mixed use. So back then, small bay industrial was not a term, but we built small bay industrial product with our self-storage. Right. But kind of getting back to the trajectory. So after we lost that one deal in 2009, we started buying loans from the bank. So one of the big ones was we went to KeyBank and bought a lot of self-storage loans. Wish I bought more, but I went to Angelo Gordon. I was like, look, we have line of sight into buying self-storage loans from the banks. And the thing with self-storage is, which no one realizes, is when you build ground up, you have a very long time to lease up. Now, different times and different cycles, that lease up can range, but it can range from 18 months being the best to 6 years to lease up a property. And it depends on the size of the property. If you go build a 120,000 square foot facility versus a 40,000 square foot facility.
So tell us, what does that look like today versus a few years ago? I mean, I know the self-storage market's gotten a little soft lately. People aren't moving as much, which, I think probably has something to do with that. Yeah. And then probably a lot of supply, I'm sure, as well. But what does it take now to lease up a new development, and what does the market look like today in self-storage?
Well, so you have several factors on. So a lease up takes there are 2 kinds of lease ups. So there's physical lease up, which you can do relatively quickly. So but now that quickly is So during COVID, the heart of COVID, you could lease up, or the end, the tail end of COVID, you could lease up a facility, physically lease up a facility in 18 months. But now to physically lease up that facility, it could be 5 years.
So you have some developers, I imagine, who are struggling right now, for sure.
Like that's actually where the biggest opportunities lie for acquiring storage facilities. Because one, the developers were developing in a time when rental rates were 25% higher. Two, the lease-ups were much faster. So now they start breaking covenants on their what were typically called these mini perm construction loans. And so you have that coupled with the fact that their interest rates doubled.
Yeah.
So now they're caught between I need a major cash in refi or I need to sell the property.
If you're still waiting on support tickets or chasing down wires, here's your sign. You've outgrown your current investor portal. InvestNext gives you modern raised infrastructure with waterfall automation, ACH payouts, and seamless co-sponsor support that scales. No more bolted-on features or just live with it answers. Your next raise deserves better. See why today's GPs are switching to InvestNext at investnext.com/nocap.
Well, so let me ask about that. So I know in multifamily, what we're seeing right now is we're seeing a lot of lenders willing to work with experienced borrowers or borrowers who seem to have their shit together. And they're willing to, modify terms, push it out a little bit longer, or what have you. Is that not happening with self-storage?
No, it has happened.
Okay.
But now they're getting past that 1 to 2 year extension that they've given. And look, they need, it's not that the equity is fully impaired on those deals, because not like GFC when people were handing out 85, 90% LTC construction loans.
What is the leverage for self-storage?
So like a typical construction loan is going to run from 55 to 75%. 75% still being high. And by the way, when rental rates dropped 25% and interest rates doubled, and so you have cap rate expansion, like that's still that 25% is impaired, but like you're probably, so there are some loans out there that are impaired when you had pockets that have a tremendous amount of supply. Now those lenders are still keeping them on the books, but we're seeing now a lot of sales. Some of even so. One thing we got into is we started an origination business. We bought loans during GFC. We've even bought loans up to even 3 years ago. But now we actually started doing an origination business, and that we kicked off 16 months ago.
So is that because you saw a gap there? I mean, obviously there's been somewhat of a lull in the credit markets. What was the rationale for that?
So the impetus so I know a big buzzword, like before private credit turned into the biggest buzzword ever.
Right.
I went to the CEO of Angelo Gordon at the time, and this was, it was kind of several months after First Republic, SVB, Signature, like when they all started collapsing. You started seeing that the banks were tightening up on lending, and I knew that self-storage would run into this problem because of the long lease up, especially for developers. So I said, look, we really want to start a lending platform, and I need a partner to do it with. And at the time, they didn't have that, and they have a large credit bucket, and they didn't have that particular bucket for doing like these kind of small granular loans. And so it turns out we actually found two competing offers from other partners and to do this business. And we were about to sign the contract. It was randomly, I'm at a dinner party, and we're a bunch of guys on one side of the table, a bunch of wives on the other side of the table. And my wife's like, oh, that guy works at Angelo Gordon. It happens to be the head of credit. And they happen to then raise a particular fund to do this type of product.
That's crazy. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, and I didn't know him, but we were like, oh, I've been partners with you for 16 years. And so he's like, why are we doing this business? This was Labor Day weekend, and Monday morning of Labor Day weekend, the CEO calls and said,
Crazy.
We want to do this business together.
Well, so do you think you're in a unique position, because I know that you do third party manage? So does that help?
So we think we're in a unique position because we don't really do third party management. So we manage for our own properties. We manage as a favor, but we don't solicit solicit third party management like our competitors. So the big difference is there are the two largest REITs, Public Storage and Extra Space.
Heard of them?
They have a very large lending business. Well, Extra Space has a very large lending business. Yep. Public Storage is playing from behind, but they've gotten into it. Storage Mart, another, we
had Chris Burnham on the podcast, which we want to talk about, because I think you guys competed a little bit on a small acquisition in New York, but yeah.
Right. But like the Burnhams are like the Duttons of self-storage.
What a good comparison. Wow.
So like it's like long generational family in the space. They're great.
Well, hold on. Before I forget, because this is just fun to me. So Chris gave us his sort of craziest shit he's seen in a self-storage unit. So let's just, before we forget.
You don't want to save this for the end?
No, I think we should just get to it. What is the craziest thing that you've seen in one of your self-storage units?
None of my capital partners are going to want to hear some of these stories, but we
hit the mute button.
But look, we've had, we've seen the largest drug bus in New York.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
the largest drug bus in New York was in a self-storage unit.
Yeah. It was.
Where would you put your drugs?
Yeah, I guess you're right.
We had outside of Fort Bragg, the ATF, and we had it all on cameras. The captain in the military, and again, probably it's a long time ago, so it doesn't matter. I'm not worried about whoever was present back then. It's not going to come after me. But the ATF surrounded the whole facility, and a captain in the military was smuggling guns out and storing it in the storage facility. And
I wonder if once that happened, if like other storage facilities all of a sudden experienced the drop, in their occupancy, because guys figured out oh my God.
Turns out 5% of their occupants are
anyway, not to diverge too far. Going back to the
that was a good
business.
one. Chris had a storage unit full of chopsticks that I think collapsed a unit. Wasn't that it?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, he said it was full of chopsticks, and the weight of it collapsed a unit, I believe. Am I making that up?
Maybe.
Right.
Well,
knowing you, maybe.
We once had, but in big plastic containers, rice, but it didn't collapse the unit. So
rice.
It could have gone with just rice.
You're going to store your rice somewhere these days.
So it could have gone well with
so interesting with how people store.
Yeah. What is it about self-storage? We asked Chris this too. I think we should get your opinion on it. Why is it that Americans are so obsessed with storing their crap?
Well, look, everything comes down to you have a lot of sentimental value to your ancestry, your history, and different from, you compare it to Italians or Spaniards, they're different. They buy two nice suits.
Yep.
They wear them until they're, the threads are coming off, and then they buy two new suits.
Yeah, we hold on to it because we go, well, maybe I'll lose weight again and I'll be able to fit back into it in a couple of years.
Right. I still have my Banana Republic flannels from when I was 15 years old. And back then, look, I was in high school in the 90s. Things were baggy.
Yeah,
so
you're like, it'll come back. It already has come back.
But it actually also fits me now. Yeah. So like in the right way. So, so people look, we're guilty. My family was guilty as charged. We had, 3 or 4 storage units forever. And so, and my wife complains, oh, your parents are hoarders. Like my mom still has like every outfit probably since the 1970s.
Yeah. That's probably what influenced you to go down this route.
Yeah, maybe subconsciously you were like, well, my mom's
I want to ask you about on the lending side. So what is the product that you guys are originating? Is it construction loans? Is it perm loans? What's it look like?
So it's a combination of all three. So it's construction loans, it's acquisition financing, and it's bridge financing.
Yeah.
So, and we're doing it in everything we operate. So we operate obviously self-storage, we operate small bay industrial, we operate car washes, and we operate and own manufactured housing. Now, that is too tight, and we can't compete on the manufactured housing lending, so that we have not put out money on so far. But self-storage, small bay, and car washes has been robust. Now, what we're seeing, so far in the 16 months that we started this, we've seen $8 billion of loans.
Wow.
You originated $8 billion.
No.
You've seen
I wish I
$8 billion.
originated $8 billion.
This is all with Angelo Gordon, by the way.
This is all with TPG Angelo Gordon.
Okay.
So, and now there are other firms that are coming to us and say we want to do this with you. One thing I'll just backtrack. The one thing I forgot to say before, what makes us a differentiator from Extra Space, Public Storage Mart is, one, we're doing construction loans. They're not. Two, our spreads are a little tighter. But three, we have no requirement, and not even a requirement. We just won't do it. We won't do the third-party management. So, which I believe is an inherent conflict of interest between lender and your
it's
borrower.
always weird. I never really understood that, but I know exactly what you mean. Are these all non-recourse or?
All non-recourse. I mean, on the construction side, they have completion guarantees.
Sure.
And sometimes we have a reserve replacement guarantee.
But it makes sense. You guys have more insight. You understand the operations. You were talking about the addressable private credit market, and who better to be a private credit issuer than someone who's a specialist in the space, right? And it's not something that's new. A lot of people do it, like in New York. Silverstein's been offering it, and every condo developer offers lending. I think that's going to become more popular.
Makes sense.
It is interesting that you're offering construction loans. You generally don't see construction loans, too much from the private credit market unless it's a debt fund that's a specialist.
Well, look, right now we have a construction team that's not doing anything. So
what better time?
We do have a 3-person construction team. Now we're still doing expansions, and where we have excess land, we do. But even the ROIs, the return on investments for those expansions aren't penciling the way they were, given the elevated construction costs.
Yeah.
And the fact that rental rates are also down 25%.
Is it that much?
It's that much.
Wow.
So you will. It's as demand. And this is on the self-storage side.
Yeah.
On small bay industrial, we're still, rents are still moving in the right direction.
With self-storage. Well, so let me ask you, I have a self-storage unit and they keep increasing my rents. So what you're telling me is I might have some leverage here to go back to them and say.
I think you're a sucker.
No, what they will tell you is, thank you for your business. We're happy to let you move to another unit, and you can go get.
I'm not going to do it.
You could go pay that administrative fee and get into that lower rent, and then
that's
4 months later they'll increase your rent back to where you were.
That's
a couple things I want to dive into.
You're totally right.
So the first is on the small bay industrial that you're doing. Are you guys building this space?
So we've built about 800,000 square feet of it. We own currently 2 million square feet of it. We've sold 1 million square feet of it.
Not a ton of people build it today. It's just
harder. So we've built over the past 24 months. Now we're not building anything. We are actually going to be building probably about another 100,000 square feet of small bay where we have, on existing pieces of land. But we're not going to go buy a piece of land today and necessarily build small bay.
So Brian, this seems like this was a natural sort of progression or ancillary product type from self-storage. I'm assuming you kind of they were add-ons to some existing self-storage, or how did you initially get into that?
Well, I got into it from developing bigger properties that I was like, what else do I do with this land?
Got it.
And I was like, let me build small bay industrial, and not really thinking it was going to be a thing.
A lot of platforms say they support GPs, but only a few actually do. If your current system makes complex raises feel complex, it might be time for an upgrade. InvestNext is built for GPs who move fast. Integrated payments, co-sponsor visibility, and a portal your LPs actually want to use. While other platforms pivot to add-on services to plug their software gaps, InvestNext is doubling down to ensure our product works for you. Raise with the tools that move like you do. Learn more at investnext.com/nocap.
And what's your typical tenant profile like for these?
So the tenants run the gamut. It's everything from, well, today look, we even have Amazon, third-party Amazon distribution. It's not Amazon lease, but there are these third-party
kind of
last mile logistics firms. So we have last mile logistics firms.
That makes sense.
We have cabinetry makers. We have a tile guy, a guy who's selling carpet. We have a CrossFit gym, a yoga studio.
Yeah. Why are CrossFit gyms always in these like industrial?
Because they don't really care about the appearance. They need room, and it's cheaper.
Yeah. Okay.
Imagine taking retail space in a strip center versus
they're always in like a space that's like not air conditioned and it smells bad.
We provide air conditioning in our properties, especially the ones we've actually put them into. Like we have a lot in Dallas.
Yeah, do you?
A lot of small bay. And I could even recommend one of our CrossFit gyms.
We need to talk afterwards. I'm not a CrossFit guy. These people, they're like cults. I don't get it.
Me neither.
Yeah.
I think my shoulder would go out.
Same.
So, all right, got it. So you guys have that. The one business that sticks out a little bit in all your verticals is the car wash, because we were talking about low capex to NOI. Car wash, I mean, to me at least, seems very high capex. You got to constantly replace these machines, unless I'm thinking about the wrong kind of car washes, and maybe you do just like self cleans.
So look, you are 100% right. Time will tell how long we want to be there. We started off, it was like the same kind of light bulb struck, and this was now about 11 years ago, when I went to the International Car Wash Conference, which has more.
You really need these conferences. Yeah.
That was a little too much of a brotherly moment.
Listen. We've been doing this long enough, so I mean, if anything, after this conversation, my come away from this is I got to go to more conferences.
I always wrote off the conferences.
Random conferences.
I'm getting it.
So there's 10,000 people at this conference, and
that's not a small conference. That's a big conference.
Storage is typically 3,000. So it blew my mind away. This is 11 years ago now.
Wow.
So before the express model was a real thing. And this was when we were buying and we were adding them to existing storage facilities where we had land, but we were buying buying what's called in-bay automatics and self-bays, where people would actually do the wash by hand. And I thought actually that was going to be, I was taking the other end of the spectrum, not going the express, but going that model, because no one's building those anymore.
Right.
And people do like to not go, if you have a nice car or
you don't trust other people.
Yeah. Right. No, the self-base is a killer business. Yeah. By the way, you go in California, you can't drive 10 feet without seeing one of them. They're everywhere.
Right? I never thought about that. You're right. You don't see new ones. I don't see that. Like they're always kind of old and
right. You don't see new ones. And what's the number one? I don't know if it's still the number one car sold in America, but it's the
F-150.
F-150. There you go. So, but how many people? You're not allowed to have an open, stuff in your back going through an express car wash. So in your cab, you're not allowed to have it open and have your ladder and your whatever. Materials you have in your cab going through an express. So they typically want to go through and use self-bays.
That's very interesting.
So that was my original thesis.
Okay.
It was, it wasn't necessarily like, the right thesis. But, look, you got to try things and, discover. But what was eye-opening is you'd listen to guys at these 11 years ago and like, I own so many of these self-bays and in-bay automatics. And, and then the question was like, well, do you use tokens or cash? And I was like, and he was like, I hate tokens. And I said, well, why do you hate tokens? He was like, well, because people take them home and use them for their poker games. And I was like, wait a second, but aren't they buying the token for you?
Isn't that better?
Yeah, he's like, yeah, they're buying a token for 50 cents. I was like, well, what does it cost? What does a token cost for you to produce? He's like, a penny, 2 pennies.
Okay.
I'm like, okay, so you're telling me you're making 48 cents for them to just take it home here. But I was like, this is but that's the kind of mindset again that like you saw a very unsophisticated mindset. So
Just the
like,
fact that they're using
do the
tokens,
math,
though,
yeah.
is kind of silly, right? I mean, in an era where everything's digitized, it's
well, now everything is, it's
Yeah.
all digitized. It's all credit card.
It's not a bad business though. If you also sell tokens and guys are taking them home
Yeah,
to play
I'd
poker and
happily
losing
just-
the tokens, coming back.
yeah. So what do you
buying
do?
more.
I'm in the token sales business,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah.
But like, so we,
Sell picks and shovels.
Now we got rid of all the tokens, and now we're just all credit cards.
Sure,
so
sure.
it just makes life easier to be all cash on that. Then we morphed into doing express, later on. It's really the last several years because we saw there was a moment in time in the last couple of years where yield started getting better.
Mm-hmm.
Like people were buying express car washes for 7 caps, and now they're you can buy deals at 9 to 10. And so we
in place, you can buy deals
place,
that
right.
way today. Huh. And so why do you think the market's gotten better on the buy side in that regard?
Well, one is saturation issue.
Okay.
So too many people are building express car washes. So they're and that's starting like self-storage, like a lot of other things. You're seeing supply drop off a cliff.
Okay.
So that's getting better. And financing costs are still very expensive, and everything in car wash borrowing is recourse.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
so it's, except for us, we're offering non-recourse.
Whoa. There's some
financing.
great plugs today, by the way, for your financing
Yeah.
packages here.
We have some very big term sheets right now with big car wash operators.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is when we started our lending platform, we thought we were going to be going more non-institutional borrowers. We're actually seeing that we're getting more institutional borrowers.
Really interesting. And so, will you guys third party car washes or no? These are all.
No, we're definitely not going to
And-
get.
and is
we
one-
own and operate our own that we
Okay.
buy, but we buy that more for our. So as we talked about, it is a capital intensive business.
Yeah.
It is also a
Operational.
It's a much more operationally.
Yeah, I was going to say, it
intensive
sounds like
business.
more of an opco than it does
Yeah.
kind of real estate. But then also there's the tax depreciation benefits, I imagine.
So that's more the reason. So we're doing it only if we can get
okay.
yield, and
You're not doing it just for the taxes.
Right.
But
You get increased depreciation, whereas it's obviously lighter on the storage side.
Look, even in when depreciation from the 2017 tax bill stepped down, even in a 40% environment, we were able to produce almost 100% year one depreciation with the leverage.
Interesting.
So, and with the cost seg that we did. So it's
And is that the real benefit? It's the cost segregation studies that you can have done because there's so many different components, and that's what it is.
That's what it is.
Got
right?
it.
So that's really more done for our high net worth bucket of investors. And for myself is like we're really focused on that depreciation. If it comes back again in this next tax bill, or big beautiful bill,
it's go time.
if it's in there, it's like I see a lot of incredible opportunities on the go forward basis
For car washes.
Well, for a lot of
everything.
verticals.
Well, you got
I gotta
100%
say,
bonus
like-
depreciation. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to say, going back to my first statement where you kind of took some of these non-sexy asset classes, which I think a lot of people, especially non-institutional ones, would have thought about it that way. You applied the most institutional thinking, I think, behind every one of your verticals, which is very impressive. Even just the way that you broke down the car wash business for yourself
Well,
and how it integrates with everything else that you're doing.
Yeah, I like that you have a real thesis going into it ahead of time, like the F-150 being the most popular car in America. And what
By the
does
way,
that
it is.
mean?
If you ever go to, I have a sister in Idaho.
Yeah.
In Boise,
Every
you land
car.
at the airport, there isn't a single car that's not an F-150.
Yeah.
I
They're
think
not
every
electric. They're not
F-150 is there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, doesn't make
But I
sense.
would say is like as you start seeing more express, you lost the cars. You lost a lot of the cars. So you still have the
Interesting.
F-150s or even boats will come through your self-bays.
That makes
But
sense.
So you ideally want to be near more muddier, grittier, or like lakes when you're having those self-bays. So
Have you become an expert in just the insides of car washes and how they actually work and the machinery and warranties and everything that has to do with them, or do you let other people kind of deal with that?
So I have not, but we have an internal expert who does.
I believe it.
Who does?
I imagine that can be a mess.
That's that's where look, the original thesis, we could really roll out car washes everywhere because we have great district managers all across the country. And the district managers we have,
and those are across all your asset types.
Across all the asset types. But it's not like we just hired someone with self-storage experience. We've hired people that ran 10 Targets or
these are
operators,
Dollar General. So they know how to manage teams and places. So we thought originally, but with car washes, you do need
some expertise.
In that because there are a lot of moving pieces. So we have someone on the mechanical side of the car washes, and then someone who handles who knows the operational side.
That makes sense. And are there any sort of incentives or any sort of issues or regulations that have to do with the water conservation aspect of all these car washes?
I mean, different municipalities require different types of conservation.
Okay.
So,
is there any benefit or any sort of thing that you're doing different that helps you perform better in a certain market? Or
they only use bottled water.
Evian. Just
so water reclamation is a thing, and how much you use of it is so it just really depends on where in the country we are. But we're not building the express, we're buying existing ones. Yeah. So a lot of them have come with reclamation. We've had to install with ones that didn't have it. We've installed.
I was just curious because that's one thing I always think about whenever I'm going to a car wash.
How big of a vertical is this relative to the portfolio?
Oh, it's small. So we have on the express side, we have 10 car washes, and then we have 5.
We're spending a lot of time on it. So I was like,
well, it's interesting.
Maybe we should have started.
We don't have a lot of car wash people.
I will say my dad operated an express car wash for over a decade, years ago. And he said that the biggest business killer for him was the weather app, because people used to not have access to the weather app, and nobody really checked the forecast a week out.
Yeah.
So you'd go, if it rained, they'll offer you a free one, but almost nobody ever came back for the free one. Now, if you see it's going to rain 3 days out, your business is kind of killed for the next 3 days, which I thought was interesting.
So the car washes. One last thing, I don't want to kill the car wash topic to death, but in terms of the membership aspect of it and operating it to be more of a profit center, is that? I imagine that's a big push, is getting people to subscribe to some sort of subscription.
Look, it is the push. I mean, that's the thing. It's same with self-storage. Same thing. We have reason why we have auto pay. So we have 74% auto pay penetration in self-storage. So it's on your credit card.
This is interesting. Your business, 2 asset types of the 3 that you're working in, very much have that.
Dynamic.
Yeah.
The difference is it's easier to move out of your storage. It's hard. It's a little bit of a process. It's like my Equinox membership that I had. I mean, I'd given up Equinox a long time ago, but when I had it, it's getting rid of it was oh my God.
Are you sure you want to cancel?
Yeah. But you couldn't even do it at the desk. You have to send in something to headquarters. Yeah. And so I was by
the way, that should be borderline illegal. The way that they make you cancel, it feels wrong. Yeah. The whole process.
What about when you want to unsubscribe?
It's not so easy to cancel your car wash subscription.
You ever try and unsubscribe from certain email blasts, and then they want you to log in to unsubscribe, and then you got to go down that path of finding your password that you lost 2 years ago just to unsubscribe?
You're supposed to get the sticky subscribers, and that's what
So
this is the perfect Larry David bit, by the way. It's how hard
you and I would be great at just writing a Curb episode. We basically are Larry David,
basically.
So okay.
Well, we'll get him too.
We'll get him on the next.
And by the way, as the operator, I don't blame you, right? Because that's exactly what it should be doing. And you guys are kind of creating. I hate saying this, SaaS-like payments. It's almost like software. It's monthly. It's very predictable.
Subscription model. Yeah. Look, subscription model works. It's great. And so
you can really predict your revenue.
The news is important, but if you're a busy real estate professional like me, you don't have time to skim through dozens of dry and ad-filled media outlets each day. That's why I read the CRE Daily. It's a free email newsletter that cuts through the clutter and delivers concise, witty commentary on the latest trends and transactions in commercial real estate. If you're a commercial real estate professional, you owe it to yourself to try it out and stay on top of what's happening in the industry. It's only 5 minutes a day. Visit credaily.com to sign up for free.
Yeah, that's super nice. Well, so one thing that's unique about your business is you have these 3 alternative product types across the country, but it sounds like, for a normal operator, that would be really difficult to run. But because you have, like what you mentioned earlier, district managers throughout the country, you're able to do so. So tell us what that's like. I mean, just being able to run and operate a business with so many different types of properties.
Yeah. And what's your organizational structure? How are people communicating across verticals, across departments? See, obviously you have a great flow.
Right. So look, so one thing we've invested a lot in just prop tech. And and if I had to sit here and name how many different, software providers we use to run all of our businesses, it would take up a full hour. But we've invested heavily in our data science and engineering team, with also the help of some of our larger capital partners. So we've leaned in on them saying, hey, can you help us? We're trying to figure this out.
And that's more automation sort of?
It's automation, it's reporting, it's the way we've been able to we can have anyone in our internal queue, we have our own built out, call it AI, whereas we have our own person you could talk to. It's how many car washes did the Tampa car wash do yesterday?
This is amazing. Yeah. That's so cool.
And so you could just type in. So we have our own AI with all of our data inputted into that. So we got very ahead of, just being able to extract all of our data and utilize it very fast.
Did you have to hire someone specific to come in and really implement that?
So it's a combination of both. Yeah. So we hired external consultants. We have an internal team, and then our 3 of our largest partners are, one's TPG, one's Blackstone, one's Ares. So we've also leveraged off some of our relationships with them because they have their data science team. So hey, we're trying to do this. This is what we want to do. And so we've said exactly what we set out to do, and they've even also helped in some of those cases.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's very impressive. I feel like, not to make comparisons between you and your competitors, but also when we had Chris on, he had mentioned data science, and now you bring it up again. And it's not something that we get from the other people we speak with, like big commercial operators,
we
big
really
multi-operators.
Don't as much. Yeah.
And it's interesting to me because I don't know if it's that they're not sharing their data internally as easily, or they're not logging it. Or maybe it's the operational aspect of the business, because obviously on the storage side, it's very competitive. There's tons of supply. You want to know the patterns and people moving, and what else do you think influences the need and reliance on good data? For multifamily, I feel like it's been guys, you look at the property next door, across the street in town, maybe you check the macros. But
the data also is, I'll give you an example of a piece of technology. We use Placer AI. It's a technology where we use to see where,
foot traffic,
where it's coming from, where it's going. So we'll if we're looking at a car wash, we'll look at where is that traffic coming and where is it going? We'll look at you'll look at the data. So, we have AI camera technology and security technology. So you can see when is our, you could actually see when's the biggest buildup? Do we need more people staffed at actually the car wash to sell memberships?
Yeah.
So there's so one of the things understanding your cohorts of your customers, of who's more likely to handle a rent increase harder, based on certain certain household income.
Sure, it's amazing how much data you can get.
But it's interesting, just the amount of touch points you're looking at versus the other kinds of operators that we talk to. Yeah. I would think, what's the holdup? Data obviously helps every aspect.
Look, it's expensive to, first of all, build it out. And it makes us, in the last since 2018, we've had 2 quarters that we haven't outperformed the REITs on our same store pool. So it makes, look, it puts less money in my pocket, but makes us, much more valuable operator in all these, areas. So it's just something you have to be, I think you have to be on the forefront of, because it is moving super fast. And I think if you're not adopting AI, data science in a meaningful way, that's gonna. I think the spread between good and bad operators, it's gonna dramatically change. And that's why you're gonna see a lot more bigger and bigger consolidation.
Yeah,
absolutely.
What's next? What's the next asset type that you would be looking at right now, or maybe that you are looking at right now?
Not sure I want to give that one away.
Okay, fair enough. Fair. Keep it.
Let's rephrase that question. What's next for Andover in terms of, like, what are you guys looking at? Is it internal growth, efficiency? Are you trying to scale more products in a vertical?
So look, I look at the next couple of years as an incredible opportunity to continue to scale our verticals. We do have one other vertical that we're looking at that I don't want to mention, but I think it's a tremendous opportunity because of debt maturities that are happening now. So you have the debt maturities coming off of the, call it the 2020, 2021, in even creeping into 2022 when interest rates were so low. You have a lot of these, some of these are 3 or 5 year loans that are now maturing, where there's a lot of you just need to be doing a lot of cash in refis. So we think there's just a lot of opportunity to buy a lot of product below replacement cost. I'm not big on developing anything right now. I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to buy well below replacement cost for the first time in a long time.
Can I ask you? This is a bit of a loaded question. So you're very development experienced. You have a ton of understanding about the construction. I think that probably provides you a certain efficiency in knowing what things should cost. Is replacement cost super relevant anymore? I feel like you can buy a lot of stuff. To build is
everything's
very
below
expensive.
Replacement costs, it seems like today.
And I'll frame it in this lens, like in the eye of office buildings in New York, right? To put up a new office building today can cost you $1,800 to north of $2,000 a foot. It's a crazy cost.
You can go buy one for $300.
You can go buy one for. You could buy a fully leased, building in a good area of Midtown for, mid to low 5s to mid 6s.
Yeah.
Do we still need to look at replacement costs in your thought?
Look, I think in environments where you have supply hitting against you, 100%.
So that's a good aspect.
So it's really when you're looking at is someone going to build a new car wash? Sure, they might still build it, but I'll buy this car wash where there's the metrics make sense. I could buy this at a good yield, but I'm buying it 20% below replacement cost. Self-storage, we're seeing, I'll see storage facilities, by the way, that still aren't penciling, and they're 50% below replacement cost. But they're developers that will do stupid things, and we see it all the time. They might put another facility in that market, but there's a good chance there won't, and 50% below replacement costs.
Yeah, so buying below replacement costs and the dearth of supply coming online over the next few years, that's kind of the game a little bit.
And you're less cap rate oriented then, because to your point, somebody might be
You might be able to lean in a little bit more and believe look, 2 years out, we're going to see housing mobility happen again, and maybe it just doesn't fully pencil even 50% below. But there might be. We want to see a line of sight. We're just not going to say, all right, well, rental rates are going to grow to the moon, and we're certainly not going to think that interest rates are going down.
And by the way, it's the same thing with multifamily, right? That's with any new institutional product. The marketing narrative is below replacement cost. That's pretty much the singular narrative, but.
You still might have to buy it at 4, but we're going to say
be patient. So where are we in the cycle? I think this is a question that we're asking everybody.
And where are interest rates going to be?
In your crystal ball, where do you think we are in the cycle, is this the time to be buying right now? This is a question we ask kind of everybody. Everyone
Sounds
has an
like
opinion.
yes, for the most part.
So I think it's do I think we're at the bottom? Most likely. I think we've like bottomed out in terms of like operating fundamentals. Like I don't think in my asset classes, I would probably even say that's true about multifamily. I think like rental rates are kind of like, everything is like kind of feeling pretty stable at the bottom. So I think it's a great buying opportunity. We are now seeing, I would say things have been at the bottom for the past 12 months. Nothing's moved up. They've kind of like bottomed
Feels
out.
like it.
The difference is you're now starting to see sellers capitulate a little bit more. So sellers are like, all right, I want to sell at a 4 when they really have to sell at a 6.
Yeah.
And like so you're seeing now the seller will like, all right, well I'll sell at a 5, but so you're still not getting that. They're not bridging the gap. What you're seeing is bigger trades happen at a 6, but you're seeing like single asset trades still at and I'm talking, this is really storage, small bay. And you're seeing like single trades still happening in the high 4s or 5 because there is some buyer out there, one single buyer who can foot a bill for a $15 million acquisition that is saying like, oh, I believe in more. But the big institutions are buying stuff at a 6.
Got it. Interesting.
Do you think that we'll still see some more pain on the seller side? Like, is that yet to come, or is it just people are being more transactional because they're comfortable with where the market is?
Well, that goes back to one of your other questions, where interest rates are going. And I think there is it's just assuming, and I kind of like feel like maybe the short term rates will come in a bit, but everything's a big guessing game right now. You have a very unpredictable government,
right? And
so the unpredictable can really like keep interest rates, stable, higher, or lower. So like I really like my crystal ball on interest rates are like, we're playing both sides on the lending side and the equity side. And we're well positioned to kind of like, play in both directions. I am a higher for longer type view in my gut.
I think that's the popular opinion now.
And I think that is what's going to create the distress.
Yeah.
And not like incredible distress, but it's going to create, no one's going to continue to extend, because if operating fundamentals stay stagnant, they're going to have to, the sellers are going to have to capitulate and start selling.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Well, Brian, it's great having you on.
Thank you for having me. It was,
we enjoyed it.
This has been really informative. I love everything that you're talking about, the amount of data that goes behind your decisions and just how you think about even the smallest of details. And you like to say that you're not an expert and you hired a bunch of smart guys, but so far every question we've thrown your way, You've answered very thoughtfully.
Yes, so I really appreciate it. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.